So the title of this presentation today, I guess, is what this site is for. ICAC Unpacked, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Unpacked, what it is not as well, and any of the successes we've had. We're coming up on about 9 months or so, basically, of this site, for which I had basically four objectives. And the first objective is to inform people about the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and what police are doing online, under the radar, underwater, if you will. So we all know when they beat the hell out of somebody like George Floyd, we know what that's about. We've seen that before. We have seen police do outstandingly wonderful things, and we've seen them done crappy things. But some of the worst things they do never get any attention, and that's the stuff that they do online. Or I should say, rarely get attention. And they certainly don't get the sustained attention a murder in plain sight gets with somebody filming the entire thing. It's much more subtle, it's more nuanced, it's much harder to prove. But that's the first objective. What does ICAC do under the radar against all of us as a public information effort, and as well as to try to explain to people companion items such as how the courts work, how prosecution works, how the psychosexual evaluations work, sex offender registry works. And the second part is the real culprits out there and the inconsistency that we see all the time. People get to game the system. It's not just in politics, we see that all the time. We see, for example, Donald Trump advancing a huge share of the 65 to 70 cases a year that the U.S. Supreme Court actually hears. Out of the 120, 150 they did 50 years ago. And of those 65 or 70, they've got 10, 12, 15 from Donald Trump alone on nonsense issues. And whenever that happens, there are issues that are actually out there that are not getting taken care of. Okay, they're not getting addressed by the courts. And these are anything, weights and measures issues, mundane, boring things that are still very important to criminal acts, violations of the Constitution, or like we like to talk about, surveillance online that never gets to them and they never take an interest in it. Instead, they decide whether Trump is criminal officially or unofficially. Okay? So that's the second thing, is to bring up the inconsistencies and to show how it's very tainted and how some people actually get away with it, and how there's no parity actually in the law. So there's not real system. It's not really a system of justice. It's a system of inequities. The third thing really is to deal with the real culprits that are out there. I mentioned that, but to go further and talk about the people like the police, who are doing an amazing job of violating our children and are not getting the attention they deserve, hurting them repeatedly. Instead, they focus on throwing into prison people like Daniel Kim, who was a high school teacher here in Fairfax County, the adjacent county to my own. And as a 29-year-old, he had a consensual relationship with one of his students in his class. He should not have done it. He should have been fired, absolutely. But he was not only punished for having a supervisory role for this 16-year-old girl, but for sexually violating her because she was so-called minor. But she was 17, 16. And again, I'm not excusing it, but I want you to compare the 12 years he was put in jail for, to a police officer somewhere else in Virginia here, Wise County, who got 10 years for aggravated rape. 10 years aggravated rape instead of 12 years for a consensual relationship with a 17-year-old when he was 29. Okay? Seems to me there may be a little inequity. But it's an honest conversation to have because, of course, we have Caitlin Grimley, a teacher in Fauquier County, you've heard me talk about a number of times, who actually had sex with a young person of 14 or 13, and she will entirely get away with it. So where's the equity here? Those are things I point out in, my third goal. The fourth goal is to build really awareness of your constitutional rights and how they're being eroded. It's very easy to say, well, it's easy. You're a perv, so you obviously defending pervs. And I'll get to the trolls here in just a minute. Fine. Fine. You want to think that? Wonderful. But also think about these other things. Think about how they are, in fact, planting evidence, how they are, in fact, violating your rights, how they are, in fact, looking over your shoulder while you're doing all manner of things. It's only now coming out about Meta and about Amazon and all these companies. Some of us were talking about it 25 years ago. I never had Facebook. I never had these social media. So when they say that, oh, golly, they're using your data and they're mining it and they're committing monopolies and they're actually harnessing your own personal information against you and your children, I said so 25 years ago. And again, if I'm going to take the hits, I should get some of the credit too. But as I said all the time, I don't need a parade and I also don't need a crucifixion. Just listen to the information, thoughtfully respond, and I'm totally okay with that. So those are really the four things, right? Education, pointing out where there's actually disparities, and pointing out how inconsistent it is, dealing with the real culprits who also don't seem to get what they deserve at times, and building capacity so that you can defend yourself by arming you with information and suggesting courses of action. Now, for those people who, continue to attack me on my site is for free exchange of ideas. Yeah, you can call me all sorts of names. I really don't mind. I'll go right back at you. It doesn't bother me a bit. What bothers me, though, is that when you keep hammering on it. There's a young man or a young person, I have no idea because they hide behind names. They think they're being clever by taking another viewer's who had a son who went to prison for something similar to what happened to me. And they took this person's name and they said this person's name in jail. And then they want to talk to me about how honest they are. And if I only somehow loaded on to the system somewhere boxes and boxes of evidence so that the troll community could simply review it and give me a clean bill of health. Well, A, they've never done that, even with the information they've got. They have massaged court records to make it appear to be something it wasn't. And the most recent thing is the new rabbit hole is to say that Ghost CC Unit's video could not possibly be edited out. And where I am responding, apparently, they claim to the word Micah, which they claim that I used on Snapchat, which I never had, to get a hold of somebody and to try to meet somebody for an assignation in the park. Of course, they do not want to hear that my back was turned, that I heard somebody call Micah and Michael sound awfully familiar, particularly for people who have a hearing problem like me. And when I turned around from bending over while I was stretching, about to do my run, because I was waiting for Josh to show up, I was confronted by this other person. And yes, I look at them and say, yes, I am. But I also say, wait a minute, who are you? What did you say? That part doesn't seem to make it in the video. So these are arguments I just don't want to have anymore. However, I'll repeat again, if you want to come and sit down with me, come to Woodbridge, Virginia. I will sit down with you. We can look through boxes and boxes of information. But it's going to come down to this. There's a fact pattern in all these cases, including mine, where you can look at it and you can say to yourself, well, I can see where they would say this if they massage this information. But there's no smoking gun. There's no picture of anybody with their hand, forgive me, but their hand down somebody's pants or touching somebody or making lewd comments a lot of times when they know what somebody's doing. Now, there are evidence of police officers doing that, which I have read into these videos as part of the record. And I'll be sharing also some of the things police say when they're caught doing these things. Okay? But there's nothing to be gained from these stings, whether vigilantes do them or not. They think they're protecting somebody, and maybe they are if you're a vigilante group like Arizona Predator Prevention or Vermont Corruption Exposed. But I'm wondering how much damage you're also doing to the family. Wouldn't it be better to help the person like this group in Massachusetts, where they help people who are real pedophiles, divert their attention to other things that are not illegal pursuits so they can, if you will, bleed off some of that energy? I can't remember the name of this group. I have it somewhere in my files. Wouldn't that be a better way than to attack and expose them and embarrass them? These people commit suicide. They their children are harassed at school. They're attacked. And again, there's no children that they actually did anything with oftentimes. They're just caught supposedly trying to set this up. And again, why don't you go after the 1,800 police officers who actually did something? The Caitlin Grimleys of the world who actually did something. Well, the reason you don't do that, of course, is because it doesn't make you look like a hero. Because there is this chip in certain people's brains that they want to be the hero. And by shaming, blaming, and attacking people who are sick, some of them, they somehow look better. And I'm not sure that's the best way. In fact, I was all set to discuss that with Arizona Predator Prevention when one of their companion predator groups who had joined them the last time I was on there decided to attack me because, in his mind, I didn't come back to the group fast enough. He saw I was posting videos on and demanded to know why I wasn't coming back. Before I could really set anything up, and I had a couple of people I really wanted to come on who had very different perspectives and who had been framed differently than me, so that these groups could really see some of the damage that they're helping to do. But before I could do that, this individual named Josh, no relation to my friend Josh, I was supposed to meet in the park that day. Um, this guy attacks me, calls me a serial predator, calls me a bunch of other names. And again, the names don't matter. Okay, the names don't matter, but he tainted the well to the point where I was like, I don't have any interest in engaging with you folks anymore. They wanted to ask me more questions about my case. That wasn't what we agreed. What we agreed was the next time members of our group, Cage, Heal, other groups around, would engage them and talk about vigilantism and suggest some ways that maybe they could curb what they were doing so it's not such a sensational and scatological takedown and humiliation and making fun of these people who may legitimately be trying to hurt people who are children and maybe aren't okay in the head. And instead, they decided that no, they wanted to ask me something in advance about my case. More rabbit holes that I just didn't want to deal with. Now, maybe they have great intentions and maybe we'll connect again. But right now, I would rather put my effort into my book and in trying to stay afloat, which is what I spend most of my time doing. Um, so I think that I want to end this really by talking about some success stories. I only have about 79 subscribers. And like I said, being a YouTube sensation or making money off this is not my intention. I don't care if I ever make a dime. I really don't. What I want to do, though, is highlight some cases, and I actually have. Um, Embarrassingly, though, the CP cases are the ones that attract the most attention, right? But I have heard from people who have issues pending in the family court about psychosexual evaluations, that they're being forced by the family court officers to do this to prove that they're good fathers, okay? Or to uh, those who have been entrapped or been induced, and there's, like me, no sex talk, no interest in that. Or they have been Romeo and Juliet cases. I've been contacted by some of them, meaning that they were 17, turned 18. The police waited till they're 18 to go after them and to frame it against their 16-year-old girlfriend as some kind of child pornography when it's simply high school dating. Okay, these are the people who have contacted me. I've been able to steer them toward resources. I've been able to help them understand what to expect, what the police will do, what the prosecution will do, and patterns are beginning to emerge. So I really ask you to please go on, and if you are out there and you know somebody who can benefit from these videos, please subscribe to them. Please send them on to people who might benefit from them. Feel free to contact me. If you need to call me names, fine. But far better to have constructive criticisms, far better to give me some real good advice. Somebody actually wrote and said, "You talk too much." And I said, "Maybe you're right." But I suggested some counter proposals too. So, again, I appreciate your comments. Keep them coming as long as they're constructive. Thank you so much these 8 months, 9 months in. And I hope that my videos have been helpful. If they have, please hit a